Chapter 3, Teach Me How to Play. The BJA System and Training Tips. BJA Philosophy. Okay, I hope I've laid a strong foundation with the following points. 1. Gambling is illogical and dumb. 2. Card counting is investing. 3. Every decision you make at a blackjack table, and even your decisions away from the tables, has a corresponding mathematical expectation. This is important. I won't be spending an undue amount of space and energy talking about the how-tos of card counting. I have an entire website, blackjackapprenticeship.com, dedicated to every step on the path of learning how to count effectively. If, after reading this book, you're determined to learn how to count cards at the professional level, everything you need to know and study to reach that goal is available on the website and YouTube channel, and it's all there for free. Advanced learning options are also available for a fee. Many students have paid for these courses with excellent results. But the tools and explanations you need to learn this discipline are at your disposal on the website for no charge. That said, in this chapter 1 provide a general overview of the techniques involved in card counting. For those new to beating blackjack, the basics are pretty simple. Learn basic strategy, the mathematically proper way to play every hand according only to your hand and the dealer's up card with no additional information. Learn card counting. Employ a winning bet spread. Learn the playing deviations. Play lots and lots of blackjack. Sounds simple enough? Well, if and when you go deep diving for the research on this stuff, you'll find many different basic strategy charts, dozens of different card counting systems, conflicting strategy deviation charts for each system, and infinite online opinions on what bet spread you should use to maximize profits and minimize casino countermeasures. Is there a better way? How's this? After reading all the books, playing thousands of hours of blackjack, researching and practicing several different counts, and running teams, I've settled on a philosophy behind learning this game. Identify what will give you the biggest bang for your buck, then go after the at the tables. When I was first counting cards for a living, I read Burning the Tables in Las Vegas by Ian Anderson, and it had a huge impact on me. While many points in the book are no longer relevant to modern card counting or just don't work for me, it has continued to be one of my favorite books on beating blackjack. In it, Anderson says he followed the KISS system. Keep it simple, stupid. He didn't overcomplicate things as far as card counting systems or deviations were concerned, but argued that he could make more money via longevity, more rounds per hour, and finding games with better deck penetration. I completely agree with Anderson. All the successful card counters I know, I'm talking 6 or 7 figure earners, have made their money not by the complexity of their system, but by aggressively attacking the casinos and getting in thousands of hours of play. We could debate this until the cows come home, but the bottom line is that all the money my teams, my friends, and I have made was from the methods that follow in these pages, or something very close to them. So while this book isn't intended to be a comprehensive how-to, as I say, we have an entire video course and website dedicated to that. It's absolutely intended to be a solid roadmap to success. Let me begin with an overview of each of the pillars of the system we've used ourselves and trained countless pros to use with regular success. Basic strategy. I'm here to learn card counting. I can imagine your eyes are already glazing over. Basic strategy. It even sounds boring. Well, it may not be sexy, but trust me, this is the most important thing you will ever learn when it comes to blackjack. It's the absolute foundation to beating the game. So what is basic strategy? It's the mathematically best way to play every possible hand in blackjack considering only the player's cards and the dealer's up card, when to hit, stand, split, double, take insurance, and if the casino offers it, surrender. Basic strategy, as I described earlier, was worked out more than 60 years ago and its accuracy has held over the decades. The basic strategy we use is based on the most common rules offered in the US. You've likely seen a basic strategy chart in a casino gift shop, online, or at the tables. The statistically correct decisions for every possible hand in blackjack are no secret, though you might think so based on how people really play in a casino. The average blackjack player might play 80% of dealt hands correctly, but without knowing 100% perfect basic strategy, there's no chance of beating the game. Why don't gamblers play according to basic strategy? Most people simply don't bother to learn how to play properly. Either they're too lazy, gambling is supposed to be fun, not work, or the basic strategy chart looks too complicated, or it just never occurs to them that there might be a better way to play. Also, as we've discussed, gamblers tend to put more faith in their intuition than the math. Remember what I was saying about gambling logic? You feel in control of your own destiny when you follow your heart at the table. But a smart player has to hand over control to the numbers. This feels a lot less exciting, though the end result, winning money, is much more fulfilling than the alternative. I've tried basic strategy, but I still lose. Thanks for being honest with yourself, and me. Secondly, yes, basic strategy won't make you a winning player, but you'll lose less if you play perfect basic strategy. This happens in 2 ways. First, Basic strategy maximizes winning hands. If basic strategy tells you to double down, it's because you have a hand with an advantage over the dealer. Doubling down helps you maximize the opportunity of those winning hands. Failing to maximize the EV of those hands will cost you dearly over the long haul. Second, it minimizes your losses. Let's say you have the dreaded 16 against a dealer's 10. Basic strategy says you should hit. Most people in a casino are scared to hit a 16 against a 10. You know what? They're right to be scared. You probably will lose, because hitting a 16 against a 10 is a play with a negative expectation. But you'll lose less money by hitting than by standing. So basic strategy will help you minimize your losses. Do not second guess the basic strategy. You have to trust it and play it exactly as prescribed. Once asked to cite the reason why a particular play should be made, the Blackjack Hall of Famer Ken Uston famously replied, "Because the computer says so." While the average gambler plays blackjack at roughly a 2% disadvantage, perfect basic strategy cuts the typical casino's blackjack house edge to about 5%, that's 1/2 of 1%. And if we don't cut the casino's advantage to 5%, we can't beat the game with card counting. Generally speaking, how do I learn basic strategy? Basic strategy is outlined in a simple chart. You can download it for free from blackjackapprenticeship.com. blackjackapprenticeship.com/blackjackstrategycharts/ Be aware that there are different basic strategies, depending, for example, on whether a dealer stands or hits on a soft 17. Some accurately take into account the various rules changes, others don't. Don't worry about the different charts floating around. Memorize one basic strategy chart: a broken bar hours. You can trust me, I care a lot about the math behind them all. Learn it perfectly, flawlessly, and mindlessly, then move on to the playing deviations. That's where those minor differences are resolved. For those who want to know it all, the best presentation of basic strategies for almost every conceivable combination of game conditions is in the book The Theory of Blackjack by Peter Griffin. Now, imagine if someone challenged you to drive a car while carrying on a conversation. No problem, right? You've been driving a car for years and you're well practiced in how to carry on a conversation. But what if someone had challenged you to carry on a conversation your first time behind the wheel? Not a good idea. New drivers need to focus all their attention on the road until it becomes second nature. Likewise, you need to be flawless at basic strategy before working on other aspects of your game. Not just flawless, but quick and unconscious. The less mental energy you need to put into recalling basic strategy, the easier everything else will be. When it becomes second nature, you can multitask without even thinking about it. Do yourself a huge favor and work to make basic strategy a perfect and automatic activity. In due time, you'll find that it won't be such a big deal to add and subtract by one while executing perfect playing decisions. Card counting: I have always used a card counting system called Hilo. All my teams used it and it's what we teach at Blackjack Apprenticeship. There are lots of different systems, but in my opinion, Hilo gives you the biggest bang for your buck. You can learn a much more complicated count, but when you consider 1, the complexity, 2, the time needed to really master it, 3, the room for error, which comes at a cost, 4, the amount of mental energy it takes to use it, and 5, the value of rounds per hour, I question whether you'll actually make more money. You can also learn a simpler system, but it will likely not be as versatile or effective as Hilo. The edge is small enough in card counting that, while you don't want to overcomplicate things, you shouldn't oversimplify things either, or you won't be profitable. And my strongest argument for Hilo is that every major card counting team I know of has used it. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me and you. I talk more about card counting systems here. blackjackapprenticeship.com/card counting systems/OK, I'm convinced. How do you count cards with Hilo? There are 4 steps to counting cards for profit. A cents: determine your count's assigned value for every card. A cents: keep a running count based on the values of the cards dealt. I cents: use this information to calculate the count per deck or true count. A cents: use the true count to change your bets and implement playing deviations. Step 1. Determine your count's assigned value for every card. A cents with Hilo, the card values are as follows. A cents: cards numbered 2 through 6 equals +1. A cents: cards numbered 7 through 9 equals 0. A cents: cards numbered 10 through ace equals A1. A cents: as each card is dealt, you either add 1, subtract 1, or do nothing based on each card's value. Step 2. The running count: as each card is dealt, update the running count with the new information you observe. You do this for each card that comes out of the chute, card after card, round after round, until the dealer shuffles the cards again. As the running count increases, the advantage begins shifting to the player. If the running count goes negative, the casino's advantage increases. Example number 1. The running count for this round is +1. Example number 2. The running count for this round is 0. Example number 3. The running count for this round is +1. Tracking the running count is like speaking a language. Instead of seeing 2a6 as a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, you begin seeing each as a +1 that you add to your running count. You see 10, Jack, Queen, King, and Ace as a A1 and you subtract 1 from your running count. In order to make it as a card counter, you need to become fluent in this language. Be aware that becoming fluent in this, as in any new language, takes time. We all start out being completely incompetent at speaking Spanish, just as we do in keeping the running count. The first time I tried it in a casino, I lost the count within 2 rounds. Another time early in my career, a pit boss asked how old I was. I froze, then focused on silently repeating the running count of 14 over and over. I stared at her for what felt like an eternity, then was finally able to force out, 23. Fluency doesn't happen overnight, but this is a language I'm sure you can learn with some practice. Step 3. Calculate the count per deck or true count. In the days prior to widespread dissemination of information about card counting, single deck games with favorable rules were the norm and the running count was all that was needed to have an effective card counting system. However, in an attempt to thwart the new menace of card counting following the publication of Thorpe's Beat the Dealer in 1966, casinos began using multiple decks. Nice try. To use the running count in a multiple deck game, you just translate that information into a true count. Think of it this way. You and I are standing in a room together and I say, I'm giving $100 to one random person in this room. How likely you are to get the $100 varies drastically if you're in a living room with 10 people or an auditorium with 1,000. With 10 people, the giveaway is worth $10 in expectation, $110 people. In the auditorium, your EV is 10 cents. $101,000 people. It's the same with the running count. Having a +5 running count with 6 decks remaining is a completely different scenario from having a +5 running count with only 1 deck remaining. In the first instance, a +5 means that the remaining 6 decks have 5 more high cards than low cards. But that's out of 312 total cards to be played before the shuffle. With a single deck, the +5 means 5 cards out of 52. Obviously, this is a much higher percentage of high cards, which is where the edge manifests. That's why the true count is so important. It's not just the number of extra high cards that matters, it's the concentration of high cards compared to low cards. Deriving a true count is how you normalize the running count for any number of decks you're playing. To calculate it, simply divide the running count by the number of decks that have yet to be dealt. As the dealer places cards in the discard tray, you can estimate how many decks have been dealt, then subtract from the number of decks in the game to determine how many remain to be played. It takes a little practice to estimate accurately, but as long as you're within a quarter of a deck, you're fine. You have to train your eye to recognize what a full deck increment looks like, then use that to make your estimates. I find it easiest to look at the cards in the tray for the first half of the shoe, then switch to gauging the empty space in the discard tray for the second half of the shoe, but different people will have different methods that work best for them. Estimate remaining decks by monitoring the discard tray. If you're in between full decks played, say 3.25 or 3.5 decks, I recommend rounding down. Count as 3 decks played. Personally, I divide by half deck increments, but the difference in expected value between full deck and half deck increments is pretty small on a 6 or 8 deck game. Still, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of deck estimation and whether it's worth dividing by full decks, half decks, or even quarter decks, I break down how it impacts your EV here. BlackjackApprenticeship.com/Jag Guide to Deck Estimation/Sticking with a Full Deck Conversion. If you're playing a 6-deck game and you can see 1 full deck in the discard tray, you know you have 5 decks left in the shoe. In this case, divide the running count by 5. A running 20 with 5 decks remaining is a true count of 4. A running 15 is a true 3, etc. If 3 out of 6 decks are in the discard tray, there are 3 decks remaining to be dealt and you divide the running count by 3. Of course, you usually won't have easily divisible numbers, so for example, a running 13 with 4 decks remaining is a true 3.25. Which you'd round down to 3. It works the same for negative counts. If the running count is a 7 and there are 2 decks remaining, the true count is a 3.5, which you'd round down to a 4. True count conversion is where most have a problem in. However, if you have reasonable calculating skills, with practice proper conversions, on BlackjackApprenticeship.com, you'll find detail about the true count conversion. You learn this stuff in practice. Don't be too proud to bust out some division flashcards. Implementing a count system. You'll be able to easily make the number of videos that go into 3rd grade, but might be out of. Step 4. Use the true count to change your bets and implement strategy deviations. I've been betting $100 a hand for several minutes, but the small cards start adding up, giving me a true 2. I place a yellow $1,000 chip on each spot. The dealer yells out, "Checks play." More small cards come out, so I raise my bids to 2 spots of $2,000. I'm dealt a blackjack and a 20, while the dealer has an ace up. Thanks to knowing the true count, I take insurance. After a few more rounds, the true count plummets, so I'm back to betting $100. This, my friends, is what our knowledge of card counting looks like in action. So now you're employing perfect basic strategy while counting the cards. You use the count information to bet according to your advantage. That's how card counters make money. The true count, in conjunction with a properly calculated bet spread, tells you how to bet to maximize your profits. The true count also informs you when to change your strategy with playing deviations. If you're brand new to card counting, all these steps might seem like a lot to handle. The truth is, counting is as simple as learning the language of card values, adding and subtracting by 1, then doing some periodic third-grade division, dividing the running count by 1/8, depending on the number of decks remaining. Bet spread. The majority of a card counter's edge comes from betting a bet less when the dealer has the advantage and more when the player has the advantage. The true count tells you exactly when the house edge has shifted from the dealer to the player. On a typical game, it happens around a true count of +1. I'll delve deeper into the glorious true one in a bit. Implementing a bet spread is actually pretty simple. You need to know the true count, which you calculate after each round, and what to bet at each true count. Then you place the correct bet before each round. Playing deviations. What if I told you that, of the $4 million my teams took from casinos, roughly $1 million of that came from not following basic strategy? That's because we knew when to follow and when to deviate. Remember, basic strategy is the proper way to play every hand of blackjack. A broken bar if you don't know the composition of the decks remaining to be dealt. Fortunately for us, we do. As the count changes, the correct way to play some of our hands also changes. For example, with a 12 against a dealer 2, basic strategy says hit. However, when the true count is above 3, it's statistically better to stand on a 12 against a 2. So anytime before a true 3, you hit 12 versus 2. Anytime at or above true 3, you stand on 12 versus 2. We can technically beat ease blackjack with basic strategy, counting, and a winning bet spread, but we get an extra 10% a 40% in EV by learning the strategy deviations. I don't know about you, but I sure want to give myself a 10% a 40% raise by memorizing a few extra playing decisions. More than 600 playing deviations appear on one of Stanford Wong's charts, but roughly 90% of the value comes from learning the 20 most important decisions. If you're learning card counting as a party trick or to impress others, learn 100 or more playing deviations. But if you want the money, don't waste your time and mental energy on having 100 different numbers bouncing around your brain. Learn the top 20, at most the top 40, then play perfect, play fast, and get in lots of hours. I talk more about playing deviations here. blackjackapprenticeship.com/blackjackdeviations/play. Once you've mastered each step outlined above and you've verified that you can execute them perfectly in a casino, it's time to get the hours in, or as Josh Axelrod puts it, repeat until rich. Or at least repeat until your bankroll has grown. You can't treat the casino like an ATM, expecting to walk out each day with more money than you started with. The math works, but it can take a couple hundred hours for all the ups and downs to cancel themselves out. After perfecting your game, it's all about getting the hours in and enjoying the wild ride. Thoughts on training as a card counter? I'm convinced my time slinging hamburgers at Red Robin perfectly prepared me for being an effective card counter. I thought waiting tables was a pretty great gig, because waiters get paid minimum wage plus tips. Long before card counting, I was already thinking in terms of maximizing of. At the very least, I had hustle. While other servers wanted to get off work early and party, I gladly took their tables. I also loved working the busy Friday and Saturday night shifts. I kept track of my tips, calculating my hourly income every night, always trying to increase my rate. After college, I even switched Red Robin locations to the one near the Microsoft campus in Redmond, WA, where people were more generous tippers. So waiting tables was a great segue into maximizing EV. But beyond EV, my time at Red Robin taught me another skill that translated to becoming a card counter: multitasking. The individual skills needed for waiting tables weren't very difficult. I was trained to greet the table, get them their drinks, take their order, make sure they were pleased with their food, refill drinks, try to upsell them on more drinks and dessert, take care of their payment, and do it all while acting like the customer was my best friend. None of those tasks, in and of themselves, is difficult. But when you go through those processes for a half dozen tables at a time, you need to become an expert at multitasking. If you can't multitask, you'll have a bunch of angry tables who might not only stiff you on the tip, but worse, complain to the manager, resulting in the manager giving you fewer tables and worse shifts. But if you can pull it off, you've got bigger tips, more tables, more coveted shifts, and positive comment cards left by the customer set, all of which lead to more money per hour. What was the key for me to successfully multitask? Simple. I mastered each individual step. Each step needs a specific procedure that you follow. The servers who screwed up were the ones who either didn't have a process for each step, how they wrote down orders, in what order they checked on the tables, where they kept their pen and notepad, how much change they carried, in which apron pocket they kept the unpaid and paid checks, or they had an ineffective process. Because the best servers had well thought out practices for all the steps and had mastered them, they were more equipped to multitask and handle more and more tables. It's exactly the same with card counting. All you're really doing is playing basic strategy, adding and subtracting by one, and occasionally doing some division to change your bets or playing decisions. Easy enough, right? Not really. If you need to concentrate too hard to remember basic strategy or keep the running count, then it'll be a train wreck trying to do both at the same time. You'll either make playing mistakes or lose the count, and that's not including making proper true count betting and deviation decisions. So how do you get there? You become an absolute expert at each individual step, then you get perfect at putting the steps together. If becoming a card counter is like building a house, basic strategy is the foundation. Everything else is built on it. If the foundation is shaky, sooner or later, the whole building will crumble. So when I say absolutely perfect at basic strategy, I don't mean I know 99% of it or I just have to think a bit harder on the soft hands. I mean effortless, mindlessly perfect, basic strategy, every time, without exception. It's so automatic, you never have to give it a single thought. It actually becomes part of your muscle memory. Still, you have to master that next step. You don't just start counting while playing basic strategy. You have to get comfortable and perfect at counting cards apart from playing basic strategy. Again, the easier it is to count cards and play basic strategy separately, the easier it will be to multitask these two skills. When you're perfect at both individually, it's time to combine them into one step. Then you practice until you're perfect at that. There's no magic number of hours this takes, you just keep at it until it's like driving a car while eating a sandwich and singing along with Queen's greatest hits. At that point, it's time to move on to the true count conversion and playing deviations. Master each skill on its own, then incorporate them into your game until you can multitask all the skills to perfection. This is how we train dozens of players for the church team and how we train card counters through Blackjack Apprenticeship. We've developed training drills for BJA members to help them with each step along the way. We provide feedback on any mistakes and time their skills. They test out for each step, then put it all together in a final test out game. This way, players can verify their skills before wasting any money in a live casino. In the next 3 sections, I discuss some of the finer points of training. Red flags. Jonathan could fill out a basic strategy or deviations chart faster than anyone else on our team. He also knew more deviations than anyone else. But during his test outs, he stumbled into some sort of basic strategy twilight zone. Invariably, he missed some playing decision involving a deviation. Oh, I was supposed to stand on the hand. I knew that. But by that point, it was too late. He'd already played the hand incorrectly and failed the test out. It was true that he knew the proper play in an academic sense, but he let his guard down and missed it in the moment when the money was in the betting circle. To solve that problem, we created red flag hands. A red flag is any hand that takes extra thought. When you're learning basic strategy, the biggest red flag hands include pair of 9s, hard 9, soft 18, soft 19. These seem to be the 4 most commonly misplayed basic strategy hands, and any hand that has a deviation from basic strategy is a red flag hand. We trained our players to say red flag when we were dealing to them and one of these hands appeared. Doing so disciplined them to slow down, identify the situation, think through everything before deciding, then finally make their move, surrender, hit, stand, split, double, etc. Over time, team members simply knew to pause an extra second when one of these red flag hands hit the felt, to make sure they played it properly. The glorious true 1 gamblers get excited when they're winning. Investors get excited when the true count gets above 1. When you're playing 6 or 8 deck games for 20+ hours a week, it can become monotonous. You can have stretches of well over an hour without getting a positive true count. You place bet after bet, waiting for an opportunity to push more money into the circle and generate some positive EV. I call that moment the glorious true 1. Around a true 1, the casino's edge shifts to the player. As counters, we're grinding it out at the tables, forced to wait patiently for those glorious situations where we gain the advantage. Depending on the rules of the game and your bet spread, you don't necessarily raise your bet right at a true 1, but you better be aware of the opportunity the moment it knocks. Unfortunately, new players often miss the glorious true 1. They start a new shoe and within a few hands, the count rises to a true 1, but they continue placing their minimum bet, perhaps neglecting to calculate the true count conversion so early in the shoe. They were counting, but weren't expecting a true 1 so soon. Or they were quickly lulled into autopilot betting by placing the same low bet over and over. As a blackjack apprentice, you need to drill it into your head that you're there for the glorious true 1. You must wait with eager anticipation for the moment the advantage shifts to the player. Adding the deviations to your game. As I mentioned previously, playing deviations account for 10% to 40% of your edge. They're definitely important, but that doesn't mean you need to learn them all at once. Start with the most important and add from there. Always take insurance at a true 3 or higher. Never take insurance below a true 3. 16 hits against a 10 on any 0 or negative running count and stands against a 10 on any positive running count, assuming you can't surrender. They're a broken bar. You now know the two most valuable deviations on the chart. When you're ready, start learning a few more. When you're perfect at basic strategy, counting, and converting to the true count, begin memorizing the deviations one section at a time. For example, just one row on the splits section of the chart has deviations. Commit that row to memory, then move on to the soft hands section of the chart. Then move on to the hard totals, and finally the surrenders hands. Before long, you'll have the top 28-25 deviations committed to memory. And that, in a nutshell, actually, a 22-page chapter, is how you learn to count cards and beat the casino at blackjack. From $10,000 to $1 million. In 4 years. Hey Joe, what were you doing before you discovered card counting? Freelance video and photography work, commercials, documentaries, and low-budget narratives. How did you learn about card counting? I found the BJA website and watched Holy Rollers. How did you train? I didn't read books on how to count cards. I used the Blackjack Apprenticeship video training course, read all the blog posts, listen to the podcasts, and read all sorts of topics on the forum. 90% of my training time was done on the iOS app. I hated math growing up, it was my least favorite subject, but I was able to dive right into card counting. Did you start winning right away? I lost my initial bankroll of $1,000 due to severe overbetting and not paying attention to the idea of risk of ruin. I saved up $10,000 and started again with a much more conservative, but pro-table, approach. How did things go your RST year? With my 10K. I played 1,000 hours at the tables and was up around $500,000. I had 100 to 200 hour losing streaks in the middle, but the RST year definitely exceeded expectation. I told myself for the RST year of playing, I'd be happy if I was up 10,000 for the entire year. I absolutely exceeded that. How much have you won to date? I've won a little over $1 million. More if you include a few friends that I've bankrolled. How much betting or playing cover do you use? I rarely use any betting cover and I never use playing cover. I'll never play a hand wrong on purpose to throw OI negation the casino. If the game is extraordinary, I might spread my bets less or play around with my bets at true 0 and -1. Why don't you use more cover? The casino has to be smart enough to be fooled and you can never know what their idea of a card counter is. They don't have the same training as you, so you shouldn't assume they know everything you know, or will even recognize that a wrong play made for cover is wrong. Players can get carried away with cover and cut their pro TS in half or worse over time. I also don't like the idea of letting the casinos have power over me to the point where I'm not playing with an edge anymore. Screw that. What is your favorite thing about being a card counter? I have a job where I'm excited to go out and play. I'm motivated to put in more hours. It's not something I feel I have to do. It's an activity I'm choosing to do each time for money. The freedom associated with being a self-employed gambler is a natural bonus that doesn't come across in your win-loss chart. At the most, I work about 6 months out of the year. What has card counting taught you that applies away from the tables? Expected value is a lesson I've learned to apply to my life outside of blackjack. Every single decision you make at a blackjack table matters. I've learned to look at a situation outside of blackjack and gear out which options will gain the most or cost the least. A local sporting goods store near my house was going out of business recently. The electronics in the store were 30 to 40% OI negation not. I bought as many Fitbits as I could OI negation ordered and sold them on eBay for a pro T. I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to pull the trigger if it hadn't been for my experience beating blackjack. I also think that playing gives me appreciation for the kindness of strangers in daily life, since as a card counter, OI negation and other players in the casino are often irritated with you.